Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here. I got another Master Duel video for you. Coming at you with another tier list. This time it's going to be with the new ban list in mind that was announced earlier this week. And of course, it's going to have a major impact on the meta because just about every deck feels like was hit on that tier list. Not literally every deck in the meta, of course, but all of the major players. Cool Tune, even decks like Magnet Warrior and Radiant Typhoon, Branded, Draco all took some amount of hits, and that has, I think, changed up a little bit where everything is at right now. So we've got 20 of the most popular and or powerful decks here. We're going to throw them on this tier list in either tiers 1, 2, 3, or in the rogue status. Now, there are definitely plenty of decks not featured here that could be, placed among these tiers as well. And of course, just because the deck is rogue doesn't mean it's a bad deck. But we are only going to be covering 20 decks. If we covered literally everything that was meta viable, we would be here all day. But I'm not opposed to doing a longer video like that at some point in the future. But anyway, let's not waste any more time. Let's go ahead and get right on into it. We got Sky Striker starting off here. I've been putting this in tier 1 lately, and I do still think it is quite powerful. It is really only losing the copies of Radiant Typhoon, Vision, and Chant from the new ban list. And of course, even then, not every Sky Striker build plays the full Radiant Typhoon engine with Chant. That said, they do all use Vision. I will say with Cool Tune getting a little bit weaker, and that being one of its better matchups, Sky Striker does end up getting a little bit weaker. I'm going to still put it towards the bottom of tier 1 for now. If you've got Sky Striker at the top of tier 2, I really would not fault you at all for that. The thing you also have to understand about Sky Striker, though, that I think a lot of people are kind of forgetting is that it's not just a matter of Sky Striker having good or bad matchups. Of course, being a more reactive, control-ish deck, that does tend to matter a little bit more than other meta decks, your matchups when you're playing Sky Striker. But it's really easy to forget Sky Striker is just a really good deck as well. It keeps getting support not only in the form of its own archetype, not in a minute, but relatively recently, but of course in any quick play spells, and there are a lot of really, really good ones out on the horizon. So yeah, I think that Sky Striker is still really good and will continue to get better. I might end up putting it down, not that far, at the top of tier 2 later, or if you have it here at the top of tier 2, wouldn't fault you at all for that. Blue Eyes, I keep having to put in tier 3. I would even begin to argue that it's like rogue status right now. Someone did make kind of the comparison of Blue Eyes and Encraft on whatever the last tier list I featured Blue Eyes is on. I think Blue Eyes is still a little bit above Encraft for me personally, just because Encraft is so coin flippy. Like, yeah, when you go first with Encraft, I feel like it's definitely stronger than Blue Eyes, right? But going second is a whole other story. And Blue Eyes does have a lot more of that balance in that it's an actual deck that plays like hand traps and stuff, or can play board breakers. Encraft is really only just ever going to be able to do its own thing, and maybe play a couple of floodgates in addition to its own, in archetype ones. It'll just pretty much be playing like Dimensional Fissure or some other floodgates to kind of help slow the opponent down, right? But even then, those are really only at their best going first. So due to the slightly more variance nature of Encraft, based on whether you go first or second, I'm going to put it in the top of Rogue, and I'm going to keep Blue Eyes towards the bottom of tier 3. That's kind of another placement though, where if you had them flipped, I wouldn't hugely disagree with you or anything like that. All right, what else do we have next? Galatea for Orcus. I still think it's probably a tier 2 deck. It is starting to see less and less play, and the power creep is becoming more and more noticeable. I might actually put it down in tier 3, like the top of tier 3 for the first time here, but it's still a very solid deck. I'll keep it here for now. Elf Note, I think, does continue to be a tier 2 deck. It was very nicely buffed with the addition of Fijalis Harmonia, but is definitely still waiting for both June Pride and the follow-up Power Patron support before we can really see what Elf Note does. And Synchron, too. It's really easy to forget Synchron when thinking about, Elf Note, but if you look at the OCG right now, Elf Note Synchron is, I believe, the most played variant in tournaments. I could be wrong about that. I could be misremembering, but there is a lot of Elf Note Synchron seeing play in the OCG right now. So lots of future waves of support for Elf Note, a deck which, again, I already think is tier 2 right now. Very solid. Man with the Mark, I've been putting in tier 3, and I think I'll continue to put in tier 3. As with a lot of back row based decks, or I guess, face-down monster-based decks too. You know, it is a little bit susceptible to being weaker going first than it is going second. It does have more room to play like hand traps, including literal trap cards to be played from the hand, like the Dominus cards. So it definitely has a better going second matchup, I think, than Encraft does. And I think it is just a better deck in general too. That's why it's here again in the middle of tier 3 and not down in Rogue. But it does still kind of suffer from, you know, not being nearly as good going second as it is going first. But still a very good deck right now. Okay, so Majesty's Fairy Tale. I'm a little tempted to put this at the bottom of tier 2. If it's not the bottom of tier 2, it's the top of tier 3 for me. You know, this deck has been putting up more results than I thought it would, despite it missing so many different pieces of support, whether it's Jania of the Ring, whether it's, you know, the Charmers Quartet Link 4, whether it's the follow-up Endymion support. I actually had a video where I recently went over all of these cards that kind of highlighted just how much better Majesty's Fairy Tale is going to be. But it's been putting up some pretty good results in particularly the Challenger Cup. It's been showing up in the European Challenger Cups quite a bit, so I think I'm actually willing to put it at the bottom of tier 2. Like a lot of placements on this tier list, if you had it a little bit lower, I really wouldn't fault you for that at all. It's got a lot of potential, again, in that future support, but it's still really good right now. Okay, I have Tristaros here to represent Crystron Trains. The last time the Crystron archetype really saw a decent amount of play was with Canine, of course, obviously caring a lot about Sulfador being a level 5 monster, whereas the Trains obviously lean more into the machine aspect with a lot of the Crystron cards, I think all of them actually being machine-type monsters, and the synergy there is really nice, and yeah, it's been doing pretty well. I think I'm willing to put it here in tier 3, maybe not as high up as like Orcus, but I think they're pretty close. Yeah, if you have both the Crystron and the Train stuff, you're actually looking at a pretty solid competitive deck right there. I think it's going to do fairly well in the current metagame. Not like obviously as well as some other decks here, but well, that's why it's in tier 3. But, you know, better than some other things like I think even Odeon or Blue Eyes. Starving Venom is representing Paiplant here, which I think is more than just a new pack hype. I think by this point, you know, it's pretty firmly solidified itself as a good rogue option in the current meta. Do I think it's better than Encraft? It is certainly better at going second, of course, with Super Poly and other similar types of effects, but I think overall it might actually be a little weaker than Encraft. See, it's hard to tell because Encraft is a really popular deck by comparison, not just to Paiplant, but actually to a lot of decks on this tier list here. But that's mostly, I think, for two main reasons. One is how cheap it is as a deck, and the other is how easy it is to play. So it's really easy to look at the larger Encraft numbers, like as in they just have more data available, and assume that it's the better deck. But I don't know, I might do that actually and leave it like that for a minute. I might change my mind there. All right, so Magnet Warrior. Magnet Warrior losing access to its Floodgate options, which of course were the Barrier Statue of the Drought and Fossil Dyna Pachycephalo, both Earth Rock monsters, both searchable and summonable off of things like Gallant Granite or Adamantipator monsters more often than not. Obviously very annoying, and obviously very glad to see them go. I definitely do still think Magnet Warrior is a tier 2 deck, probably about on par with where Majesty's Fairy Tale is at right now, maybe just a little bit higher. I think that while those floodgates were very important tools for Magnet Warrior, they were not required for Magnet Warrior to do well. It can still, of course, when it goes off, put out a pretty much unstoppable board, and it's still a really solid going second deck with a lot of push as well. And I think that it will remain a tier 2 deck despite the Floodgate cards being banned. I'm not going to say they weren't important to Magnet Warrior's end board, but they weren't like the only reason the deck is good, which some people are kind of making that out to be the case. I don't agree personally. Yummy. It's really hard to kind of evaluate Yummy because of so many different variants. I will say that Mitsurugi Yummy really has fallen off, I think, more than any other variant. Usually when I see Yummy cropping up in like community tournaments or, you know, people talking about reaching Master 1 or rating duels with Yummy variants, it's usually either Fiendsmith Yummy or Snake Eye Yummy in my experience. And the Snake Eye variant does get more 2 copies of OSS. I don't really think that Snake Eye Yummy in particular needs that, but it is there as an option. I've been putting Yummy in tier 3, and I think I'm going to continue to do that. I think it's pretty much on par with Orcus as far as like how strong it is in the current meta. Yummy Snatchy did go back from 2 to 3, and that does help the pure variant it a little bit, but it actually doesn't really change a lot in the grand scheme of things. Like, in some cases, even when Snatchy was at 3, there were some builds that were choosing only to play 2. You mostly just played 3 because, like, you had a decent amount of room in your extra deck, right? But if you're on a variant like Snake Eye or Mitsurugi, you were probably only playing 2. Hell, in my Mitsurugi Azamina Snake Eye Yummy deck, the pile deck, I only play 1 copy of Yummy Snatchy, and that's all I need for my combo line. Granted, I do use Link Karibo, but yeah, I don't know how much the 3rd Yummy Snatchy actually ends up mattering for any variant but Pure. And the thing about Pure Yummy, like with no other engines at all, is that Cupsy Yummy is still at 1, which is still going to make Pure Yummy pretty much unplayable just from a consistency standpoint. So I think that it's going to remain mostly where it was here in like tier 3. Okay, Radiant Typhoon. Losing out on a copy of Rapier as well as a copy of Vision Enchant. The Vision Enchant are just consistency hits. I don't think those cards being semi-limited hugely affects Radiant Typhoon. And the Rapier semi-limit is going to definitely be the most impactful one. However, that doesn't change a ton. I've played a decent amount of Zodiac Radiant Typhoon, and basically Rapier to 2 means that you can only end on either UDF or Trident. You can't end on both anymore. And even when you did end on both, the UDF was so much more impactful than the Trident. I think that you just end up making UDF and then don't make the Trident, and then your end board is like, it is slightly weaker, but it's really not that big of a difference losing out on the Trident there. It is still something you'll notice though, and you'll definitely of course notice the consistency hits as well. I do still think Radiant Typhoon, both Pure and Zodiac, are tier 1 decks. I think they're probably still above Sky Striker as well. Yeah, the Zodiac variant again with the Rapier, you're really gonna notice that semi-limit. I think that the Zodiac variant, honestly, is probably still the better one, even with the ban list changes, but Pure does look a lot more appealing when the Zodiac engine loses a good amount of its power there. Okay, Cool Tune, I think, will continue to be a tier 1 deck. But will it continue to be the best deck in the room? It's really just taking a couple of minor consistency hits. Although, granted, in addition to all the other minor consistency hits it's already had, that is really going to add up. You know, before Fidralis Harmonia came out, I kind of made the argument that Radiant Typhoon was even better than Cool Tune. And I think that was true at the time. With Harmonia, that gave Cool Tune a good bit of extra power. But now, it's not even a matter of power, it's more consistency, right? I don't know. I think these end up being a lot more even with the new, not like that. I think Sky Striker is still below these two, but I think Radiant Typhoon and Cool Tune are like pretty much as good as each other right now. I think I'll still put Cool Tune a little bit further ahead, but like it's not by a lot. I think they're pretty much equal. Pretty much. We'll see. Luna Light does still continue to be a really, really good tier 2 deck. The double Liger Dancer is still a lot for most decks to be able to out, and as a result, Lunalight has remained meta competitive despite not really getting any follow-up support after the wave of Liger Dancer. There was a new Lunalight card that just got announced for the TCG. Of course, it's anyone's guess as to when that'll actually come out in Master Duel. I don't think that card has a huge impact, though, in Lunalight. So I think that where it's at now will still pretty much be where it's at when that card is out, but I do still think it's a really solid tier 2 deck right now. K9 Vanquish Soul, also a pretty solid tier 2 deck. I think it's about on par with Elf Note. I see Elf Note a little bit more, so I'll put Elf Note a little bit higher. Of course, obviously, K9 VS's biggest weakness is always going to be how reliant it is on opening the correct attributes, but yeah, I still think it's pretty solid in the current metagame. Okay, Synchron. I am going to put it in Rogue. It is going to be below some of these other decks here, but I think Synchron is worth talking about with the release of Fidralis Harmonia. I'm seeing it a lot more often, and also paired with Elf Note too. Elf Note Synchron is a much more consistent variant of the deck that has a lot more push through boards and hand traps. And of course, again, Harmonia really helps out. And I think it's always worth bringing up Synchron as we're looking closer and closer to the release of some of the Overframe collection cards. I'm telling you, Synchro Emergency, but even more than that, Star Junk Synchron is so insane for the deck. It's going to be a huge impact when that comes out. And I think Synchron will actually make the jump up to at least tier 3 when that follow-up support comes out. So it's at the bottom of the tier list, I think, for this one, but definitely don't sleep on Synchron. It's really good now, and it's only going to get better as time goes on. Okay, Mitsurugi. I do love me some Mitsurugi. I do also have to put the deck in tier 2, though, about on par with like Elf Note and K9 VS. I think that while Fidros Harmonia did help not only buff power in the form of a good hand trap, but also consistency, being able to unpower to the Arclight and search ritual monsters, obviously really good. While that did really help, I think that Mitsurugi is still really feeling the limit of prayers, as it should. I think prayers should be at 1. Habakiri at 2, I think, is also fine. I think it could be at 3, and it wouldn't really be that big of a difference. I think it could be at 1, and for any variant that's not pure, it also, I don't think, would make a huge difference. But I think 2 is a pretty good spot for it. But yeah, I think Mitsurugi's in a good spot right now in terms of like balance, with prayers being at 1. Also worth noting for future support, there is the Demise King of Armageddon retrain that can copy ritual cards, and that is going to be a pretty decent consistency buff for all Mitsurugi variants, but especially pure. So looking forward to that coming out. But yeah, I think Mitsu's in a pretty good spot right now in terms of balance, while still being very relevant in the current metagame. Okay, so both Draco Tail and Branded lost a single copy of Branded Fusion. Of the 2 decks, I think Draco Tail definitely feels this a lot more, and I think it is going to have less impact than you might think, despite the fact that it does still hurt Draco Tail, you know, a bit more. They can still access Branded Fusion through Vert Anaconda. Again, they were a little bit more reliant on opening it than Branded actually was, but I still think that Draco Tail is a really solid tier 1 deck, and I don't think the limiting of Branded Fusion changes that. Limiting of Branded Fusion I don't think affects Branded pretty much at all, and I think that actually does make Branded just the strongest deck in the upcoming metagame. I mean, yeah, you would just much rather begin your combo line with White Albaz anyway. I do think White Albaz should definitely go to 1 at some point. Obviously, they're not going to limit it while it's still in the shop, and Branded does seem to be just Konami's favorite archetype to, you know, advertise and support and just keep endlessly making cards for. That's not to say they haven't hit Branded cards in the past. Obviously, Branded Fusion just went to 1, but I think if they do end up limiting White Albaz, it's gonna be a minute. I think even after the pack leaves rotation, yeah, I am at a point where I think White Albaz should go to 1. It is a cool card in terms of what it can enable, not even necessarily for Branded, but for like using Branded as an engine. But it is definitely strong. I would say too strong. Yeah, I would agree. And finally, Malice. I think Malice is like upper tier 3, like on par with Orcus and Yummy. I see it do a little bit more as far as like putting out results than the other 2 decks, and actually the same is true for Yummy over Orcus, so I think I'll arrange them like this. But yeah, I've been seeing a lot more Majesty's Fairy Tale than Malice out there in terms of like community tournaments and Challenger Cups and all that kind of stuff, so I think I'll leave it like this, and I think I'm pretty satisfied with this tier list. So I think because there was a relatively even distribution of hits across the meta on this last ban list, we're seeing a meta that's relatively unchanged, but you are definitely going to notice if you're on Cool Tune, for example, you're gonna notice that lack of Q and Synchro. If you're on Radiant Typhoon and playing the Zodiac variant especially, you're definitely gonna notice the hits from this list. You know, Draco Tail, you'll be doing your Branded plays just a little bit less often. Again, I think Branded comes out the most unscathed here, which is why I have it up here in tier 1, but literally every one of the decks I've put in tier 1 was affected in some way, shape, or form in about equal measures, again with the exception of Branded and arguably Sky Striker. You know, they were all impacted by the list, and they're all going to be feeling the loss of those cards. So I think, you know, if in terms of like using that as a measure of success, I think this ban list was very successful at addressing, you know, pretty much every deck that's super relevant right now. But definitely let me know what you think in the comments below as well. Thank you as always for watching. Super appreciate your support, especially for watching all the way to the end like this. Yeah, that's all I got for you though for now. So let's move on to our outro. That way we can thank our YouTube members and Patreon subscribers. Hey everybody, Hexlex here. Thank you so very much for watching all the way to the very end of the video, which by the way is one of the best ways to support the channel. Speaking of supporting the channel, take a look at the names on screen. These are folks who have been so generous as to either join as a YouTube member or subscribe over on patreon.com/Hexlex to support. There's also perks for doing so. If you would like to see YouTube videos early, as well as some exclusive videos that get uploaded to YouTube, but for one reason or another I decide not to publish, definitely go ahead and hit that join button to see content early, as well as some exclusive content. If you're looking for more exclusive content, over on patreon.com, I upload exclusive videos that are not posted on YouTube just about every single day. Whether you choose to subscribe over on Patreon, join as a YouTube member, or simply continue to watch, your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you so very much. But for now, this is Hexlex. I am signing out, and I hope that you have a fantastic day.